Hello, everyone. I'm CJ, or Caroline. All right, so some of you may have heard the phrase, "I'm so amazed by what God has done in your life," or perhaps, "I can really see the ways that God has worked in you." I've been wrestling with my dislike of this phrase for the past year or so now, and I'm still not positive where I stand with it. It all started the fall of my sophomore year. As many of you know, I had just come back from Australia, where I had lived for 6 months with my family when COVID hit. The isolation hit me way harder than expected. While spending 90% of my time with my family was possibly my mom's dreams come true, it was not so for me. I came back for the start of fall semester and was hit with an unfamiliar wave of anxiety and apathy. As someone who's typically more extroverted than introverted, I was struck with an overwhelming desire to shrink into myself. Going from recognizing no one while in Australia to being with an exorbitant amount of people affected me in ways I didn't know how to handle. I couldn't be with more than a couple people at a time. I didn't want to engage in people's lives. I felt myself pulling away from the people I loved and cared for. My time with God was almost non-existent, and I really felt the weight of it. The one thing I desired more than anything else at this time was to feel pursued. I wanted to be cared for, but I never actually sought to make this happen. I wanted to be magically fixed without having to put in any effort. It was late November of that year when I heard God speak to me basically for the first time ever. I heard him tell me how unlike myself I was being, how I was heading in the exact opposite direction of where he was leading me. If I wanted a change in my life, then I actually had to do it. I had wanted God to do all the work for me. This was a game changer for me. It truly turned my life around like nothing else had. When God speaks, he desires for us to respond. I started asking myself how I could have let it get this far. What else in my life did I expect a change in without work going into it? I would never expect this with sports or school, so why was I expecting it with God and with relationships? Change takes work. This is the mantra I repeated to myself daily to remind myself that if I wanted deeper relationships, then I needed to start with me. I started delving back into the Word as well as spending time with God. I was incorporating new practices into my routine, such as small, consistent prayers. The one I've been repeating almost daily for about a year now has been, "God, I pray that I would be intentional with my time and present in everything I do." This included the people I was around and the relationships I had been letting go of. All of this was hard. It took a lot of work, and it was tiring. But the change was noticeable, not just to me, but also to the people I was interacting with. I had multiple people come up to me and tell me how different I was acting. So now here comes the part where I explain what I've been struggling with. When people would mention my change, it often came across to me as though they were saying, "Wow, I'm really glad that God has made this change for you," when in fact it didn't feel like that at all. It felt like I had put a lot of work into making this change. I got to the point where I would rather have someone not say anything at all to me than to say one of those phrases. I know their intention was to give praise to God as well as show their support, but it felt like they were only seeing half the story. Yes, I knew God made a shift in my life. Yes, I knew that none of this would have happened without God's intervention, but it also felt like these things wouldn't have happened without me as well. I was and am still struggling with my desire to give God the praise while also not brushing off the fact that if I had not put in work, then the change wouldn't have happened. I had literally just learned the other side of this when the previous semester I had been waiting for God to make the change in me. I felt like I deserved credit for the work that I had done. Although I'm still struggling to balance my desire to give glory to God with my desire for self-recognition, I've realized that in the end, it doesn't really matter what I want. God is pleased with me no matter what. My desire for others to see the work that I have put in is unnecessary because God is already proud of me. My desire for others to see the work that he recognizes the work and wants to continue working with me to deepen our relationship. So often I feel like I used to brush aside the work that goes into keeping up a relationship with God. I thought if he wanted something to happen, he would just do it with or without my consent. I have learned that God does do much of the heavy lifting, but without a receptive heart and a desire to change, I am never going to see the change that I want in my life. I'm CJ, and that's my snapshot.